Give me the gift of a grip-top sock, a dip-drape, ship-shape, tip-top sock, not your spip-slick, slapstick, slip-shod stock, but a plastic elastic grip-top sock.
None of your fantastic slack swap socks from a slapdash, flash cash, haberdash shop, not a knick-knack, knit-lock, knock-knee, knickerbocker sock with a mock shop, blob, model trick, tick-tocker clock.
Not a super sheer, sear, sucka-pucka, sack, smock sock. Not a spot-speckled, frog-freckled, cheapskate sock. Off a hodgepodge, moss-blotch, botch-scotch block.
Nothing slip, slap, drip, drop, flip, flop, or clip, clop. Tip me to a tip-top, grip-top sock.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Camille WHO, the teaching artist. Hey, hope you're well. Here's what I'm sharing today, and I'm going to do a shameless plug. What you saw was one of the exercises that we do in our drama classes. This is for the sake of learning how to speak clear diction, learning how to correct whatever sort of speechy, lazy things that we tend to, the lazy habits that we tend to have with our just the way that we say things, especially with American children or Americans, period. We swallow vowels and consonants and all that stuff, and we just have slang and all that kind of thing. But when you're telling a story with your voice, you have to be able to speak clearly. The more clearer you can tell the story, the clearer your audience receives it, and the better they are able to have a full experience. Now, over the years, I have come across many dozens of children, actually. This includes children who I have raised or helped raise. And I somehow figured out a way, like there were common speech errors that children would make, these children would make. And what happens is, especially in drama class, what happens is, by the time they come to me, they're, 7 years old, 8 years old, and they have these speech errors that they have been carrying on since when they started talking. So for years at this point, for whatever different reasons, it could be that parents either cannot afford speech therapy, that they don't pick up that they need speech therapy, that there is no availability of speech therapy, that there's simply just no time because the families are just super busy and really just can't afford the time to bring their children to a speech therapist. Before you know it, time goes by. Your child is 7 or 8 years old and they have a speech error that hasn't been addressed. So what has happened is they have worked this groove, making this speech error over and over and over again, so much so that that's just what they hear. It's just what they're used to. When they come to me in drama class, I think at this point, parents are hoping that drama class can help them to correct their speech. But what they don't understand is that they've been making this speech error for so long that what they're hearing is not wrong, and that they won't become aware of it enough to make the change. There are 3 common speech errors that I've come across between the children I've taught and the children that I raised and the children that I helped raised, that I figured out how to correct and teach it to them, that they were able to correct it in weeks or months, but they were able to correct it. The child has to be able to hear the difference, because I think one of the things that they check for in speech therapy is if the child has a hearing issue. If they have a hearing issue, then that's a different kind of problem, right? That's a different kind of issue. They're just not hearing it correctly. But if they're hearing it correctly, it's somehow in the muscle development, in the muscle exercising, in the processing, how they're processing the sound, like that kind of gets muddled, and then it becomes a habit, and then this habit becomes this deep groove. By the time they're 7, 8 years old, you're just so used to it that you just continue to make this speech error? I was in high school in voice class when I was learning vocal music in the Fame High School. We were learning an Italian unit, or we were in an Italian unit. Then there was French, then there was German, then there was English. English we do last because that is the hardest language to actually learn to sing correctly. So we had a Chinese exchange student and who had a beautiful voice but was unable to say the letter R sound. Now, this is natural for him because in his language there was no reason for him to have that sound. So I remember the voice teacher stopping the class and taking the time out to let's figure this out. Maybe we can all figure it. Maybe somehow collectively we can figure out how to teach him the letter R sound, and maybe he can grasp it. And I remember us taking the rest of the class, and I really admired her for it because she wasn't doing it to embarrass him. She just wanted him to really take advantage and have the full experience of coming all the way to America to be a student in voice and then be able to have the full experience of being able to sing any genre of music. It kind of stuck with me, that kind of obsession. I'll tell you why. One of the reasons is because I became a recording artist. Being a recording artist, perfection is a biggie. And then doing plays and then doing musicals. All of these things sort of added to my obsession of perfection. Okay. There was that, plus the fact that my mother, who was very, very much trained in the Queen's English from Jamaica, and coming from a very educated background, she had come to America, her and my father had come to America as immigrants, and I was first generation American Jamaican, and she just made sure we did not speak that broken English. Some people call it patois. Jamaican people call it patois. There's a patois in English, and then there's a patois in French. So you have Jamaican patois, and my father spoke Jamaican patois. He's still to this day. But as a teacher of language, my mother was very adamant about us speaking proper English. And so she corrected us all the time. So there was that level of, she set that standard, which started the level of perfection in how we speak, which is why I don't sound normally like I don't sound like your typical New Yorker, but I'm a native New Yorker. I was in New York City till, almost 30, and never sounded like your typical New York City. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, where sometimes I slip into my Queens, New York City, my Queens, New York accent. Somehow, sometimes things happen or whatever, I'm talking about a certain kind of thing, and then you actually hear it come out. But for the most part, if you hear me speak, right, it doesn't sound like the New York City girl. So that was the standard of speech that I was coming out the gate with. Then I started to sing, be trained in vocal music, sing background, do recordings, vocal recordings, session recordings, and then got into theater. Now I was in a show called Stomp, and Stomp, you don't use speech at all. But every once in a while, there's the person that's in charge, and everyone's kind of coming off stage, and then that person, after we've not said anything at all, he says one thing. And every once in a while this happens, and it's kind of like a gag. So they say one thing. Usually it's just one sentence. It's nothing else because the show is not about talking at all. It's music and theatrics. In that very moment, it's so crucial to have clear speech, because in that one sentence that person says, your audience is getting the joke. Your audience is receiving a joke. If that person had a speech error, it removes the audience 1 degree from that experience, from that joke, from them experiencing that joke. And it sort of takes away from that moment because then the next moment has happened and you're trying to catch up. It makes it difficult for our audience members as well when the person who is speaking has a speech error. That said, this made it really challenging for students who had speech errors in drama classes, because as good as an actor as they are or were, we couldn't understand them. So giving them a speaking part was really, really heartbreaking because we couldn't. And I know that parents are just waiting for that child to speak or have that speaking part. And it's like, I'm so sorry. We actually have to think about the whole experience. Maybe they'll say one or two things, but they cannot. It's really difficult when when there's another student or another actor can actually speak clearly and get that message across verbally to your audience than it is for the student that has a speech error. You mix all of that with us trying to figure out how to teach this Chinese student how to say the letter R sound. That kind of stuck with me. And then eventually I had a child who had two different kinds of speech errors. At that point, I was like, you know what? Let me really put my mind to it. And because I'm a movement teacher, I took a movement approach. And I said, okay, well, if he can learn a new movement with his mouth and his tongue and then he can, that sort of gives him no other choice but to produce that sound. Then it's kind of like learning a dance step or learning some sort of theatrical move and then practicing that move. And then eventually it becomes natural to them. So I helped one of my children correct one speech error. I have video because you really wouldn't believe that this happened. And then, so we worked on one thing at a time, one speech error at a time. He corrected that in a matter of weeks. And then we worked on the other one and it's gone. So I really started to put that, it's not just theory. Now I'm putting this into practice. And the children that I came across with, it seems to be those same three. This is why I say the three common speech errors American children make. This is to say that other children from other countries may not necessarily have those sounds in their vocabulary. So this was mainly the focus of, this is the common speech errors that I came across with American children in my care. I was able to figure it out. And then I helped a grandmother on the playground one day, and she was talking about one of her grandchildren, and I gave her gave her a description of what she should try. And the next time I saw her, guess what? It was corrected. It was on that playground where I realized, well, gee, I was able to explain that to her in a simple enough way for her to grasp it and take that to her grandchild. Why don't I write a book about it? So here's where the shameless plug is. And I have to put this in there. Why? Because at the time that this video is being published, either I will be in the process of, or it will be right before it happens or right after it happens. But there's a book that I wrote called 3 Common Speech Errors American Children Make, Correction and Confidence. Because I'm a storyteller, because I like to break things down and help other people understand it better, this is what I did. I wrote it in a book. So you get my history, you get my speech history, you get my perfection history, you get my what made me get to that point of writing the book history, which in this video you just got a little bit of just a brief, but you'll get to know me, why I even got to the point of writing the book, and there are ways to correct it. And I also put some activities and games and fun things that can go along with the process with teachers and parents to help their children correct these speech errors. Dozens and dozens of children have come my way in my theater classes, and I was like, I know what this is. Here you go. Try this. And then they would do it. And then before you know it, it's gone. Recently, I went to a student that I had when he was 8 years old, and he had a lisp. And I remember us doing a theater, just a drum, one of the workouts that we did, because I would warm up the voice, give them some breathing exercises, and also warm up the body and do a physical stretch. So one of the exercises was so breathing in and controlling the breath out, and he would go. So I said, you know what, do this. Right. And so I'm not going to give you all the details. You're going to have to buy the book. But what I did was, hey, just try this. And then he tried it. And then here we are, cut to, I don't know, 10 years. No, maybe about 7 years later, because I think he's about 15 or so now. 7 years later, and it just dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't have that lisp anymore. And I said to him, do you remember when you had a lisp? And he was like, what? I said, do you remember when you had a lisp? He's like, I had a lisp? I said, it's because I helped you get rid of it. He was like, what? So I said, go ask your parents for any videos that they may have of you when you're 7 years old, prior to you coming to me, being my student, and us correcting this speech error. So cool. So yeah, I mean, they really don't. He just completely forgot, and I've completely forgot because I had done it so many times with so many different students that it was just really just like, hey, learn this new move with your mouth and with your tongue or with your teeth or whatever, and like they over enunciate for a little while, and after a while, it just became natural. I think that kind of like covers how I teach, or the steps in which I teach something. I notice something, then I notice the pattern of it, then I create a theory, then I put the theory to the test, and then I teach it. That was just one of those things that I'd noticed about my teaching style. So yes, goodness, if the book has not already come out, if it's not already published, or been released, look out for it. 3 common speech errors American children make, correction and confidence, by yours truly, Camille Armstrong. This is crazy. Like, it's so surreal, the fact that I have a book out there. I am in the middle of writing my second book, by the way, and there are many to come, along with YouTube series, so you can get to know me on and in other facets of what I do and who I am and how God has gifted me. There is not necessarily a Bible scripture that goes along with it, other than your gifts will make a way for you and bring you before great kings. I think it's a Proverbs. Sometimes our challenges are the very thing that actually help us to impact the world, really just help other people make the world a better place. Stay tuned for the next lesson from yours truly, Camille WHO, the teaching artist. I am out.